Hey, it's Drybear. Today I'm going to walk you through the ultimate guide to breeding pals in Palworld. Breeding is the ultimate end game for Palworld, and it is how you get pals like the one you see on screen, my main water pal that has all of the best traits in the game combined on one pal with insane stats. My Namiel Suzaka Aqua has 1523 attack, 865 defense, and 7400 HP despite being only an epic pal. You accomplish this by breeding pals together, passing on their traits, combining them together, and then breeding more and more until you roll good stats on them to upgrade them into the super mega giga pal. And in this example, my water starter, my water main, can actually solo 1v1 the Blazomit world boss in just about 10 seconds without any assistance because of how powerful this pal is. Today I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about breeding pals in Palworld, why you should do it, what you need to do it. Also walk you through my pal breeding ranch that has everything it needs to be self-sufficient to generate tons and tons of eggs that can be incubated and hatched every single minute. To answer the first question, why you should breed in the first place, is because when you put two pals together, a male and a female, in a breeding farm, when they generate offspring, they have a chance to create their own trait. They can have any random trait in the game, but they also have a elevated chance to pass on any of their current traits to their offspring, which means that if you continually breed pals together, you can even put things like the legend passive that only exists on legendary pals. You can put it on epic or rare pals if you'd like. You can even put a whole bunch of different quality traits together to create a perfect pal that has insane stats for whatever you're wanting to use it for. Or a mount that's incredibly fast, a worker that's incredibly efficient, or a fighter that's incredibly powerful. And pals can pass on any trait. The only trait that I'm aware of that doesn't get passed on to offspring is going to be the alpha pal trait, which is the boss tag that you get on bosses that you collect. This little red icon in the top left corner. This is the only thing that I'm aware of that doesn't pass on to offspring. Every other passive, including the legend passive, can be passed on to offspring. Next, let's walk through my optimized pal ranch so you can get yourself set up with a fully self-sufficient ranch that generates eggs at a high rate. To do this, you will need the feed box from level 4, the berry plantation from level 5, the ranch from level 5, the hot spring from level 9, or the high quality hot spring you get later on, the wheat plantation from level 15, the mill from level 15, the cooking pot from level 17, and the breeding farm from level 19. Now, in order to breed a pal, you need to have a breeding farm placed down, and then inside of it, you need to assign a male and a female pal to the breeding farm, and then you also need to supply it with food. And then after a while, when this bar fills up, an egg will be spawned that has some combination of those two parents that creates a pal. Inside, or I guess right outside of the breeding farm, you will find a box. In this box, you need to place cake. For whatever reason, just go with it. Cake is what fuels the lovemaking process. If you don't have any cake, you won't generate any eggs. So for every egg that gets created, you need one cake inside of this, and it will spawn right here, and they can stack up. Then you need an egg incubator that you can use to incubate eggs. You can have multiple, and you have two different choices. The first choice is if you just don't care about the realism of it and you just want to create pals, you can set this to have a 0 hatch time, so you can incubate eggs instantly and get the pals done and spawned. That's a pretty good drop right there. You do this by going into the server settings, go all the way down to time to incubate massive egg. Other eggs also require time to incubate. And you can actually set this to 0, which means the incubation time is 0. You won't have to play the mini game of incubating, and you can set this down to get this instant. But if you want the more realistic or traditional approach where you do have to play the mini game for hatching, you can set this to 1, or you can set this to a higher value if you want to have that process. Now, I actually did go the traditional route on previous iterations of my pal ranch, and if you do want to go down that road, I recommend probably about 8 to 12 incubators, and you want to place them inside. That's the secret. If they're outside, they will succumb to whatever the outside environment is, so keeping them warm or cold is going to be impossible if they're sitting outside. So you want to build a fully enclosed structure, place them inside, and then place each one next to either a cooler or a furnace or both, and then swap depending on the element that you have. And it needs to be fully enclosed with 4 walls, a roof, and a floor in order for you to get the right temperature. And that's if you're going to go the traditional route of actually incubating the eggs yourself. If you do the instant route, you really only need 1 or 2 if you want to walk less, but just 1 in order to incubate all of the eggs that you've created. Next, you will need to create cake, and this takes quite a while on the first version, the cooking pot that you make. It requires flour, red berries, milk, egg, and honey. And before you have your ranch fully operational, you can actually buy some of these ingredients from red-coated merchants located all over the world. You'll be able to pick up eggs, red berries, milk, and sometimes honey. But the ultimate goal is to make the farm itself self-sufficient, which means it creates its own ingredients, generates its own cake, and constantly generates new eggs that you can use to create the perfect pound. So firstly, we're going to create 1 to 2 berry plantations. These are very easy to unlock. You'll get them in the technology. You want to make 1 or 2. I tried 3, and 3 feels to be a little bit too much if you're having the extra work here, just to make sure you have enough of the staff, the pals, working on the ranch and the breeding farm and the kindling and the watering and the planting, growing in order to do that. So 1 to 2 of these berry plantations and 1 to 2, probably 2 of these wheat plantations. Well, and then you'll want the pals to be able to generate this to create the wheat and the red berries. Then you want to place down 1 or 2 of the mills, and this is how you're going to create the flour for the cakes. In order to do this, you just need wheat. So the wheat plantation creates the wheat, you store it, put it inside of the mill, and then you create your flour, and you use the flour to create the cake, and then you use the red berries to create the cake as well. But this doesn't solve the problem of getting the milk, the eggs, and the honey. We do that using the ranch. There are plenty of pals in the game of Palworld that generate items or currency when they're assigned to a ranch. We're going to accomplish these resources by going through and picking up 3 mozzarinas. You need at least 3 to generate enough milk. You can see their passive is when assigned to ranch, they generate milk. You want 3 or 4 chickpeas. When assigned to a ranch, they lay eggs. You want about 1 or 2 of the bee guards, which you can find in the grassy areas. When assigned to a ranch, they sometimes drop honey. That creates our milk, our egg, and our honey infinitely. It's constantly being generated for free as long as those pals are being made. So I can grab these here. Keep in mind that they will, all of the haulers will pick them up and put them in the feed box because it is technically food. You want to come over to the feed box, grab those out, and put them in a crafting container so you can use them for the creation of cake. And to maintain the ranch itself, you'll want 3 gardeners or farmers. And you'll want each of them to have both the planting and the gathering skill so they can do both, because both don't happen at the same time. I want to make sure you have them there. My recommendation for these is Petalia, Baylet, Burdosh, which you can find on the world map as well. My absolute favorite is Lylene because she's so good. She's level 4 planting, level 2 gathering. All of these that I've listed also have handiwork, so you can craft, and then some of them have transporting as well for moving things around. And she's excellent at producing medicine, which you'll use to keep your farm active. When it comes to watering, I prefer ground type pals only, the ones that walk on the ground. All of the aerial pals like Suzaku Aqua or even Yormantide are really big. I find that they get stuck. They get stuck on top of trees constantly. They fall off. They go underneath the ground. I found Broncherry Aqua and things like Pen King to be really useful because they never get stuck. They don't get on top of trees. They just go back and forth and they water. And you need waterers because they will be the ones watering the plants, the crops, to keep them moving. But you also need a waterer in order to run the mill, which will create your flour. You want to place these next to each other so that your waterers can water the plantation, water the flour, create the flour, go back and forth, and you're good to go. You can also use Elfidrin Aqua or even Surfent early on in the game. Are also great choices for water as they generally don't get stuck on. And lastly, you'll want about 3 to 4 kindlers, the ones that will actually use fire to run the cooking pot or the electric kitchen in order to create the cakes that you need to generate some pals. You're gonna have probably 2 to 4 cooking pots or 1 to 2 electric kitchens if you're far enough in the game. You'll want to have 3 to 4 kindlers depending on what type you're using to keep these moving. So You're always generating cake because with 3 to 4 of these breeding farms, you will be moving through a lot of them. When it comes to kindlers, Blazomet's one of my favorites because he focuses on that if there's no mining around, and he's really good at it. Normantide Ignis can be fine too, as long as he doesn't have the Alpha Pal tag, because he'll get stuck on some things. Reptyro is also a great choice because he has good range on the fire breath, so again, pretty good at not getting stuck on things and being able to complete the op. And to keep it running, you just want to check on it periodically. Make sure you're going to the feed box, grabbing the milk, the eggs, and the honey, and placing them in crafting storage so you can actually use them to create the cakes. Go through, make sure you have flour and you have the cakes running on as many as you can, and then put the cakes in the box and make sure you have your breeding pairs together. Now let's talk breeding pairs. You will need a male and a female, and you need to put them together inside of the ranch. And this gets really finicky depending on how you have these spaced out. You'll see that this space is really big. I have everything spaced out a lot so they don't get stuck on things. But this is the best way. This is my tip for placing them in the breeding farm to make sure they don't wander off, slack off, get lost, get stuck on something. What you usually want to do is keep them in the box, and I tend to have them next to each other, the breeding pairs that I use. So this is a pair, this is a pair, and this is a pair, and you'll just want to move them out one by one. So you take them out of the box, drop them, immediately turn around and grab them, run over to the breeding farm, and what I like doing is going in just inside of the entrance. You can see I'm just past the entrance gate. Make sure your cursor is about level, and then just drop them, and they'll go right into the breeding farm. Don't hold right click to zoom in, throw it at the ground. Sometimes they'll hit other buildings. Sometimes they'll hit this building and say that there's no available task to do. It gets really finicky and weird. The most consistent way I've done this is I just run in to just about inside, hold my crosshair about at like level, like horizon level, and press F without zooming in, and they'll land right in front of you, go straight into the breeding farm. You'll know they'll register because it'll say assigned to breeding farm. They'll get the registration for the gender that you're putting on here, and then you'll be able to put that in. So then once you do one at a time, now this Blazomet is inside of the breeding farm. We're gonna go over and grab the pair that I'm pairing him with, which is the female Suzaku Aqua. Again, drop, turn around, pick up, run over to the breeding farm, go right inside the entrance, aim at about even level, throw, registered. Sometimes they will bug out pretty consistently. Sometimes you'll throw them down and they won't register. It'll say no work available in the immediate vicinity, or you'll throw it down and it'll say that it's trying to assign it to something far away. That's why I have these so spaced out. To fix this, if you're trying to fix this, there's 3 different things that you can do. First one to try is just to take them out of the area and then respawn them back in and try throwing them back into the breeding farm. This usually solves it when it's kind of like a light issue. If it's a little bit more intense than that, what you can do is you can actually just teleport away. So we can jump over to my main base here and we can just teleport away and reset that and get that going. I love the way he jiggles. And then we're just going to go back to the breeding farm in order to see if we can get him working inside of the farm yet again. Sometimes even that doesn't work. When you're trying to get him assigned, you can see like even though he's way inside of the breeding farm, he's trying to go to the egg incubator, or he says that there's nothing available. No matter what you do, it's bugged out. So the next thing you can do outside of swapping them in and out of the PAL box and going into a different area and teleporting back is what I recommend doing is just pull all of your breeding pairs out of the area and then restart, like close out, go back to the title and come back in. That should set you straight. And sometimes if things get really wonky, you can also try swapping them to a different breeding farm. I've had it so certain pals just don't like being at one of the breeding farms. So say he's failing to be applied here. Sometimes I'll pick them up and move them over to a different breeding farm and drop them in, and they'll be assigned, and then we'll be good to go. And once you do everything right, you'll be able to go over here inside of the breeding farm and see that there is 1 male, 1 female, and it'll say love is blossoming between the 2 pals. The bar will start filling up. You just need to make sure that inside this box is cake, because if there's no cake in here, the egg won't spawn. It requires 1 cake for every egg that comes out. If there's none in there, it'll warn you that there is none. You want to make sure that you have that filled. Now keep in mind that again, any trait can be passed on to offspring except for the alpha pal status. You can get any combination of traits. So for example, the best trait in the game is the legend trait, which only appears on legendary pals that you find as world bosses out in the world. So these legendary rarity pals that you'll find as world bosses, they're the ones that have the legend trait. But then you can breed those legendaries down into different versions and different pals and eventually get that onto whatever pal that you're looking for to get that combination there. You might be looking for a combat style pal with musclehead, legend, ferocious, and flame emperor. You might be looking for a working pal, or maybe even an incredibly fast mount that has swift, nimble, runner, and legend to be the fastest mount in the entire game. You're looking to get the right traits onto the pal, but you also want to make sure you get the right stats as well. When a pal is captured or when a pal is hatched from an egg, it will get a random assessment of attack, defense, and HP stats, plus some hidden stats behind the scenes. You want to get a bunch of them to see if you can get the best rolled stats on it and then use that as your primary pal. The next question is, how do you create the pal that you're looking for? Well, the answer is that every single pal in the game has a fixed set number of combinations that creates that pal. It is actually 100% fixed, 100% reproducible. You don't have to worry about it. You can just go online to resources that allow you to figure out what the calculation is. Say you want to get an Incineram knocked, you can actually set that on one of these websites. You can see that if you combine an Incineram with a Maraith or an Incineram knocked with an Incineram knocked, you will get an Incineram knocked. Anubis can be Anubis plus Incineram knocked or Incineram plus Serpent. You can put all these together to create these, and there's multiple resources that I'll leave down below in the description and in the comments that you can go find to figure out what it is you're trying to create and what combination of parents you'll need to create that child. And this is where the interim breeding comes in, because you have these high power pals that have passives like Legend that only appear on a small subset of pals. You'll need to combine with several other pals to move that trait onto the offspring and then rebreed the offspring until you eventually get it onto the target that you want, which is how I got the Legend passive on a Suzaku Aqua that never has that naturally, and the Lord of the Sea passive, which only appears on Yormantide, the world boss. So I've got all these passives on this pal, even though half of these aren't even naturally occurring. My personal favorite combination is the Legend passive for 20% attack, 20% defense, 15% movement speed, Ferocious for 20% attack, Musclehead for 30% attack, and minus 50% work speed, but these will be combat pals anyways, and then the elemental bonus for that element type that will scale up with it. If you didn't know, pals that are a specific element, if they use an attack that matches their element, they get a damage bonus to that. You can also get the boss level elemental bonus to increase that bonus further, which gives you even more scaling on like element. Lord of the Sea is the elemental passive trait that comes from Yormantide, the world boss. You'll have to capture Yormantide and then breed that passive trait onto whatever pal you're trying to get it onto. Lazamit in the Volcano region has the fire passive, the Flame Emperor, which gives you fire bonus to attacks. Tetragon has the dragon bonus, Divine Dragon. Anubis has the ground passive, Earth Emperor, which gives you ground attack bonus to attacks and can be bred onto other pals. Frostallion in the Frozen Mountains has the Ice Emperor passive that allows you to pass on ice attack scaling. And then the hardest world boss in the game is the dual fight Polydius and Necromus on the far north side of the desert. Necromus has the Lord of the Underworld passive, which increases dark attack damage, and Polydius has the Celestial Emperor passive, which increases neutral attack. All of those world bosses can be caught and captured and pass their traits on, but there are other elements that we didn't cover you'll have to find through other means. Orzurk is an electric type pal that has the Lord of Lightning passive, which gives increase to lightning attack damage. He is only found either through breeding or in Wildlife Sanctuary number 3 here in the northeast, just outside of the desert area. You have to come to these wildlife sanctuaries. You will be trespassing, you'll be attacked, but you can find Orzurks here. As soon as you get 1 or 2, you can get a breeding pair and you can create that, or you can do it through breeding, which we'll talk about in just a second. One of my favorite pals in the game, Lylene, gives you the Spirit Emperor passive, which gives you increase to grass attack damage. Lylene, just like Orzurk, is in the same Wildlife Sanctuary number 3, or you can find her in raids. I got my first one from a raid that came in that had 2 Lylenes in it, and you capture it and keep it, and you've got that going. And that's how you get all of the elemental bonus passives that you can get for your pals. Now, using the resources online, palworld.gg is one of them. You can see in the breeding calculator that I have here. You can also use palworldtrainer.com. They have a text list, which is pretty easy to use. You can figure that out. But if you go to the legendary pals, some of these pals in the possible parents category, you can see that they actually don't have that many possible combinations. So for example, to make a Necromus, you can only combine a Necromus with a Necromus, which means for these legendary pals, sometimes you just need to capture them multiple times until you have a male and female breeding pair, and then you just need to breed them together over and over and breed out bad traits and keep good traits as you swap in the children for the parents and keep inbreeding them until you have the kind that you want. But you can also get really tricky by creating interim pals that allow you to get to the goal that you're wanting. We talked earlier about how you have to go to a wildlife sanctuary to get an Orzurk if you want, but if you have a Grizzbolt and a Relaxosaurus, you can combine them together in the breeding farm to create an Orzurk, and they will have a chance to inherit the traits from their parents. Keep in mind that even in the case where you're doing a legendary that has no possible combinations, the children that come out of this can have random traits as well. So even if both parents have no traits at all, you can still create an offspring that has new traits on it that the parents didn't have. So you can eventually create the kind you want in this case. But for these, you want to get that there. So when you start asking, okay, maybe I want to get the legend passive from a legendary pal that only has this combination. How do I get that legend passive off of this if it doesn't naturally occur on the other pals? Well, there are other combinations that are possible that will create different pals. So for example, I could take Polydius, which has the legend passive on him, combine him with an Arsox, and that will create a Mossanda that has a chance of inheriting the legend trait from Polydius as the parent, which means you can start creating interim pals. So maybe you create a Mossanda that has the legend trait on it. Then you combine that new Mossanda that has legend trait with a Tombat that has good traits that you want, and that creates an Incineram. So you can get an Incineram that has the legend trait. And then combine that Incineram with Astagon to create a Pyron that has the legend passive on it, so on and so forth. So pick a male and female, put them in the breeding farm, feed them cake, and then keep getting eggs until you get the passive. Next thing you'll want to do is actually put down a PAL Essence Condenser. This allows you to get to the 4-star upgraded version of that PAL. You will need to feed this 116 duplicates of that PAL in order to get to the highest level. This is because in order to get to from level 1 to level 2, you need 4 duplicates of that exact PAL to get to this. Currently, in the current state of the game, you actually have to have the exact amount. You can't do this partially for some reason. I'm sure they'll change that in future updates, but you'll be able to swap that in. This goes from 4 pals required to 16 to 32 to 64, which means the total number of duplicate pals you need to get a 4-star version of that pal is 116. What I like to do for this is while I'm focusing on breeding one pal, right now I'm working on Blizomit. I want a legend level fire pal. There are no legendary rarity fire pals. Blizomit is epic, but he is the highest possible, and I want to get one that works really well and has the passives. You want to just run a bunch of them, get in the hundreds. So you have a bunch of Blizomits here, and I have some of them that actually do have the traits that I want: Legend, Ferocious, Musclehead, and Flame Emperor. And then I just keep creating them more and more and more. I put the ones that have the passives here, and I just pick the one that rolled the best stats. You can see this has 3 more attack than this one, but some of these have higher HP values on that. Then I go over to the PAL Essence Condenser, and what's great about this is you can actually just go to this, open it up, and when you select a PAL, it says down here in the bottom left how many you have in inventory. This number comes from the number you have in your boxes and the number you have in your party combined. It does not count any of the pals that are currently active on any of your bases or out in a PAL box area. So if they're working, they won't count for this number here. You can see that once I get to 116, I know I have enough duplicates. I can combine them all down, get a 4-star Blizomit with perfect traits and perfect stats. And then I have a supercharged, powerful fire legend level pal that can probably kill Frostallion in a matter of seconds. Also, unless you have 2 pals that are nocturnal that are breeding, you want to put a bed next to your breeding farm so you can actually set it to daytime to get them back to breeding, because you'll just pass that time there and that won't be progressing it forward in your real lifetime, not the in-game time, but it'll get them back to work creating more eggs. I'll end the video with some general tips and tricks that I've picked up from having to recreate this base many, many times to make it fully optimal. First thing is create a completely flat space. Stairs and elevation get these AI bots stuck on things, trapped in things. Flying pals will get stuck on top of trees. They'll get underneath things. The best I've found that allows me to have a very clean base is find a flat open area, put the pile box in the middle on top of a foundation, and then make foundations that go out all the way to the very edge of the pal aura to make sure that it's very clean, and then place everything with plenty of space around it. You can see everything's very spaced out. The ranches are over there, the breeding farms are over there, the plantations are here, and in the middle is the pal box and some of the functional areas. But all of that is separated enough so that they can move around and they don't get stuck on each other or stuck on terrain. The next tip is a very quick one here. Sometimes you'll accidentally pick up pals that you didn't mean to. You don't want to reassign these by dropping them down. The best thing I've found is just to roll. If you pick up the wrong pal on accident, just roll. If they fall off you when you roll, they won't be reassigned to something new. They won't break. they'll just go back to doing what they were doing. So if you accidentally, which happens all the time, you accidentally pick up a pal, just roll to drop them and then get back to what you're doing, especially if it took you a bunch of effort to get the right pals together inside of a breeding farm. You come in here to grab an egg and you accidentally grab one of them. You don't want to go through the finicky process of trying to assign them to the farm again. Just roll, it'll drop them and you won't have to worry about it. Also try to use ground pals as much as possible. Any of the large floating pals or the flying pals tend to get stuck a lot on things, so just make sure you're using that. Also keep in mind that some pals are very annoying to track down and pick up just based on their size and orientation. I found that with Yarmantide, especially with the world boss version, the alpha pal version of him, you have to jump to grab him. Make sure you have that there, and then you want to make sure you put his body inside of the farm the way it works there. But you can see he's a big pain because he has a great passive and good stats, but boy is he annoying to work with because he's just so dang. On top of that, constantly be making cakes. You're going to burn through these so insanely fast. I also recommend leaving the cakes and the flour in the processing unit that it came from, because it won't start to expire until you've collected it. So until you're ready to use it, you can leave it in there to prevent the timer from going down. And once they're ready and you're in your inventory, move the cakes over into the breeding farm, because inside the breeding farm, they don't decay. And again, you can change the nighttime settings and the incubation settings in the world settings. If it is your server, or if you know the person has a server, you can swap those out. And that's how you make a mega giga breeding farm for making the best pals in the game possible. I hope you found this. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.